Hi Year 11 and welcome to this revision session and homework task. I've included a practice extract style exam question for you in the AQA style that you'll be used to, so that you can have a go as well at that. So I'd like you to watch through, make notes on this presentation, and then I want you to actually have a go at the exam question when that's finished. To start us off, let's just remind ourselves what you have to do for this particular exam. So these are the key assessment objectives that you need to remember and remind yourself of while you're doing it. First of all, obviously remembering that you need to use quotations. You need to ensure that you use some technical vocabulary in order to analyse the language, that you reference that as you analyse, and the structure where possible as well. Obviously, if you don't refer to the structure, you can't get the higher levels, so you need to do that. AO3 covers the context really, so understanding obviously the Victorian period, but you may reference that to Dickens himself as well, his purposes and motivations for writing the novella in the first place. And finally, actually, is that now those first three assessment objectives combine to give you your 30 marks, but you also have 4 marks available for this question for AO4, which is your vocabulary, your sentence structure, etc. So SPAG largely, and how well you use that. Those marks are there, you don't want to miss out on them, so you do need to think about that and make sure that you plan and structure your writing well so that you can get the best possible marks there for that. So this is the extract that I've chosen for you to have a go at. First of all, when you get the question, you need to think it should give you some contextual information, so whereabouts in the novella or the background to this particular excerpt. So here it's telling you, in this extract, Scrooge is being shown the life of the Cratchit family. And then if you look further down, before you actually start reading the extract, I would recommend that you read the question as well, so you know the sort of thing you're looking for. And it's important as you're reading, even on your first reading, you may already be starting to think of the kinds of things that might be useful for you to discuss. I would recommend that you read the question a minimum of twice, I would say probably 3 times through, and on your second and third readings to be making notes and annotations and starting to plan out the beginning of your answer, so you're actively reading as you go through. So here it says obviously for the question as well, starting with this extract. So the key point here is in your answer you want to begin with the extract that's in front of you and get as much as you can from that. Particularly those of you perhaps are not as confident with the rest of the novel, you won't have a choice of questions here. This is the only question you will have. It isn't like an Inspector Calls, for example, where you'll have 2 options. You will just have the extract and that one question to tackle. So make the most of this as much as you can. But bear in mind, in order to get better marks, you have to refer to the novel as a whole. There isn't a strict guideline in terms of, 50% on the extract, 50% on the whole novel. That is up to you, but obviously you want some sort of balance. You could weight it more for the extract if you wanted, providing your discussion of the rest of the novel is in enough detail. Obviously, make notes here and think about what the question is asking you. It's no good writing about and analysing the language if it doesn't relate to the question. So this is asking you, how does Dickens present the good people in A Christmas Carol? It will also give you some suggestions of the sorts of things you can write about, which are usually pretty common sense. In this case, how does Dickens present the good heart of Tiny Tim in this extract? How does Dickens present good people in the novel as a whole? So those are guidelines to help you, but in writing about good people in A Christmas Carol, which this question is, I would suggest it's not just Tiny Tim that you could talk about here, but we'll come on to that in a second. I'll read the extract through for you and then we'll look at some of the things that you might want to discuss. "And how did little Tim behave?" asked Mrs. Cratchit, when she had rallied Bob on his credulity and Bob had hugged his daughter to his heart's content. As good as gold, said Bob, and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in the church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Bob's voice was tremulous when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. His active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim before another word was spoken, escorted by his mother and sister to his stool before the fire. And while Bob, turning his cuffs as if, poor fellow, they were capable of being made more shabby, compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, and stirred it round and put it on the hob to simmer, Master Peter and the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in high procession. So, obviously focusing on the Cratchits here, so I think you can talk about more than Tiny Tim, but let's look at the sort of things that you can pick out here. So first of all, obviously I'm sure most of you have spotted this as well, to begin with, as good as gold. So we have a simile to begin with there that we can talk to with reference to Tiny Tim. Now you could draw that out, obviously, as good as gold on one hand, just points just generally to Tiny Tim's goodness. But also the word gold in particular has particular significance in the novel. If we think about gold in reference to Scrooge and how he's been seen, think about the quotation with which Belle talks about him in terms of how an idol has replaced him in her affections, her in his affections rather. But here it's been used in a much more positive way. So I've got the gold reference is something shining, something bright, something warm, something wholesome, in very stark contrast. And it's also particularly important here, perhaps because the Cratchits are so poor. They have little gold, but gold can be seen here as something that outweighs actual finance and mere money. So that's certainly something you could draw a lot out of and talk about a great deal. We have here as well another important reference, made lame beggars walk and blind men see. So here we have a reference where Tiny Tim is sort of requesting others to think of him. He can see beyond his own situation and hopes that others will see him and be reminded of Jesus. And obviously, as this particularly at Christmas time is particularly important, that people will be reminded because of his deformity, because of the fact that he is, as he states, a cripple. They will think of the Bible. So you have here a reference, an intertextual reference out, and a religious symbolism, if you like, is being brought in here into the novel, which again is important in terms of Dickens's didactic purpose. Here he wants to educate his readers, and he's asking them to remember the importance of Christmas Day as well. So obviously you can talk about that a great deal as well. Now, if we look as well at the other characters here, the other family members, and not just him, we have Bob's voice here being described as tremulous. So an adjective used there to describe his voice, and also a verb, the trembled, both working together. They contrast the word strong and hearty, and from that we can infer, we can read between the lines to suggest that the opposite of this is true, that clearly Tiny Tim is not growing strong and hearty, and we hear that emotion in Bob's voice. We see then the goodness in Bob, his care for his child, his love for his child, his determination to have a positive outlook perhaps in front of Tiny Tim as well, and to be positive, even though the truth is the family are aware that Tiny Tim is not well and is in his worsening. We have words here, his active little crutch, so adjectives here to describe the crutch, the sound imagery we're getting there of that, the word little as well combined with tiny, for his name. The whole thing suggests, that how small he is, his tiny stature, and yet we're here that he's a bigger character. He's a warm, loving, caring character, despite his diminutive size, and those sort of things may pull on the heartstrings of the reader as well. So they're designed to create an emotive response in us, a sense of sympathy and of empathy as well, perhaps, combined with the previous reference from Bob Cratchit, to make the reader feel a certain amount of pity and care. And again, this is linking into Dickens' purpose. He wants that emotional response from the reader. He wants us to care, but not just for Tiny Tim, but for all children in this situation. Children are particularly important to him, and their suffering matters. We have there as well this reference here to Bob. There's a sense here the narrator, which could be Dickens's voice, this omniscient narrator talking to us here to describe this scene, describes Bob turning up his cuffs as if, poor fellow, they were capable of being made more shabby. So that parenthetical remark, if you like, that's put in there, again designed to in the read to make us feel sorry for this good man, this caring father. We have evidence as well at the start of his caring nature, of his goodness, when it mentions had hugged his daughter to his heart's content. So they're verbs to show his depth of love and affection. This is an affectionate, caring, loving family. We have more examples of that, where Tiny Tim is escorted by his brother and sister to his stool before the fire. So again, they care for him as well. They look after him. So all of those members in this family are shown in a very positive, loving light. And you could talk about all of them, not just Tim. But Tim perhaps in particular, because he stirs up this emotion in others. He is capable of inspiring as well the rest of the family and their love and their affection. So there's several things that you could pick out there. Obviously, you may well spot other things as well that you can discuss. Let's have a look at how perhaps you can structure some of your paragraphs now and put them together, certainly as far as this excerpt is concerned. Once you've discussed this and you're happy, you've picked out the key things you want to discuss from the text, and it might not be all of the ones I've listed here. There might be others perhaps you want to talk about. Then you obviously need to broaden it out to the whole novel. I'm going to leave it up to you to decide which particular characters you are going to talk about, which are the good characters you are going to pick on. But there are lots of them. So you need to think about who they are and the kind of things you can talk about in relation to the idea of good people and how they're presented by Dickens and what his purpose is behind presenting them. Fezziwig, for example, would be a good one to choose, but you might choose, obviously, Scrooge's nephew, Fred, as well. You may choose Belle and some of the comments that she makes as well, which shows that she's not a materialistic person, she's a good person, a caring person. So there are several others that you could pick from. The portly gentlemen who are mentioned at the start, who come looking, trying to raise money for charity in order to help the poor. The ones who obviously Scrooge spurns and turns away. So those are others as well that you could mention. Now, this perhaps is a suggestion, somewhat simplified, but gives you an idea of the sort of things that you could say, the way you could structure. I've done this in a sort of extended, this is aiming, if you like, for higher marks. So thinking about developing your paragraphs considerably. So you've got points there that you can make. Dickens presents good people by, Dickens' use of adjectives, etc., whichever you choose, shows this or does this. Then on to your evidence, so put in your evidence. Remember, it's better if you can embed those quotes. So these are a bit simplified here, really. Ideally, you want to try and embed quotes perhaps in with your point. Certainly, that's where the higher marks will be and will come across and read better as well, more academically. Then you've got your explanation, so you develop and you explain to the examiner what you mean. So it could begin with something, this implies, this signifies, suggests, and so on. The final one there, in addition, furthermore, also, is looking at multiple possible interpretations and explanations from a particular quote. So rather than just make one possible suggestion about a quotation, aim to put forward multiple if you can. Again, that's where the higher marks are. Certainly, if you want to go more for level 7 and 8, grade 7 and 8 rather, then clearly you need to push and you need to look for multiple interpretations, perhaps from the same quotation. Then you've got analysis, so then you can zoom in, and we've talked about zooming in on particular words and looking at what they might suggest. So inferences and things you can pick up and identify from particular words and say why they might be significant. And you can also develop those if you think about it in terms of how this makes the reader feel. Remember, some of you have forgotten about that. You do need to say how this particular thing might impact on the reader somewhere. You might want to bring in contextual information about the Victorian period time, the treatment for children, for example, very relevant. Ideas about religion, perhaps. And also what Dickens is trying to achieve, his purpose, what his motives are, his worries and fears and concerns about the poor. So that's important as well. So what I'd like you to do now, using the copy of that extract that you've got for homework, is to have a go using some of these ideas and put together an answer for this. I would recommend, you've got lots of ideas to go off there. Get some other quotations that you can use for them from the rest of the text and develop your answer. You want to spend around, I would suggest, now you've watched this for probably 40 minutes or so, putting that answer together. Okay, enjoy.